And then we take there's a or da müssen wir noch kurz die ich tue einfach die da. Aha. Ich kann es Englisch machen, aber noch versteht Deutsch.
Ja, mach.
Welcome back. We have two presentations, one by Julia Rüegger. This will be in German. Also, I can do the biography in English. But then we have Geert, and this will be in English. And then we have a music performance later on. So we go into that. Bon appetit. Yeah. Have a snack. So the bio of Julia, she was also part of the community in September in Sachsenthal. And I'm looking forward to have her now on stage presenting her PhD research or part of it, so it's an ongoing project. And she will be also involved in Basel then as a performance act together with public. Okay, and Julia lives in Basel, is an author, literary mediator, and a PhD researcher. I have probably to do that, sorry. She studied creative writing, theater, and philosophy, and most recently published the questionnaire Sind ihre Wunden gut verheilt? Since 2025, she has been researching contemporary emancipatory forms of flânerie. She will talk about that, and drifting at the graduate program Aesthetic Practice at the University of Hildesheim. Together with Sam Keller, who was also a presenter and performer in Sachsenthal last year, she organized the walking series The Long Way Home in Basel. The website you can find in the reader, and I'm looking forward to hear about your research. Stage is yours.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I thought I could also maybe do it in English, but I'm not sure. More people understand English, right? Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I mean, the quotes will sometimes be in German, sometimes in English. And I'm really looking forward. I hope, I mean, I always have a hard time reducing the material and coming to the point. So I have a lot of folia and quotes, and we won't go through everything, but I just hope to give you some glimpses on my research. And since I started a year ago, and I'm still very much in researching the field, and I have not yet really arrived at coming down on two main theses, so it might still be a bit a lot, but maybe you can help me also to make it a bit more graspable. But the main theme of mine is like critical flânerie. I think it's also very much connected to what Nestle said yesterday about critical flânerie is one that also takes into account the marginalized perspectives and more than human perspectives, and yeah, also questions of democratic environments. So this is also a main interest of mine in contemporary flânerie, and I will just lead you through some aspects. So yeah, why Leute, why not going home? I will talk a bit about the classical figure of the flaneur since in the last 100 years. Of course, only spotlights, and then a main issue or interest of mine is exclusions, Ausschlüsse in social and spatial terms. And then I will talk about das Ausschwärmen zur Wiederaneignung, and yeah, remembering. So yeah, just a nice quote to start. Der Aufstand beginnt als Spaziergang. Heiner Müller said, I don't know how to translate it very quickly, but yeah, the revolt starts as a walk, maybe. Yeah, so first thing, planieren. I guess you all know Walter Benjamin, who was a German philosopher and very important author of critical theory, who committed suicide when trying to get away from the Nazis. And he wrote this massive book, Passagen, das Passagenwerk, which is unfinished. But in it, and also in other texts, he wrote a lot about the figure of the flaneur in a very specific way. And yeah, I brought some things about the word flanieren, which, in German, I mean, there are different origins, but for example, you can see that it comes from unbesonnen herumlaufen. In the English dictionary, you find definitions of flaneur as lounger or saunterer, an idle man about town, or also the mooner, stroller, saunterer, city walker, and idler upon town. And also in the German one, you find, in the German lexicon, you find translations like Bummler, Faulpelz, Nichtstuer, Schmarotzer, und Müßiggänger, which I find very interesting because it's already a very specific interpretation of the flaneur. And one can, of course, also ask, I mean, I don't know how to translate Schmarotzer, but one could really ask, why is the flaneur, is he schmarotzing on the city or what? But yeah, you see there is already a tense connection between like questions of productivity and doing nothing. Yeah. Yeah, and then Walter Benjamin, for example, he wrote many small passages about the flaneur, and he wrote Dialektik der Flanerie, einerseits der Mann, der sich von allem und allem angesehen fühlt, der Verdächtige schlechthin, andererseits der völlig unauffindbare, Geborgene. Vermutlich ist es eben diese Dialektik, die der Mann der Menge entwickelt. So Der Mann der Menge is a short story by Edgar Allan Poe, which was also very important for the invention of the flaneur. Yeah, and also it's not a coincidence that it says the man, as we know, the flaneurs was not so popular or made invisible. Yeah, Walter Benjamin also wrote kind of Marxistic things about, had a Marxistic perspective on the flaneur. He wrote that the flaneur does not buy things, but is rather a commodity. And this is a quote that I still don't really understand. So I have it here without, I can't really say what he means. I'm still figuring out. And he wrote, der Flaneur protestiert mit seiner ostentativen Gelassenheit gegen den Produktionsprozess. Yeah, so you can see in his vision, the flaneur was really, it was always embedded in social structures and kind of a opposite figure to capitalism. Genau, die Flanerie veranschauliche, dass der Ertrag des Müßigganges wertvoller sei als der Arbeit. Und yeah, so in this sense, the flaneur is much more or a more complex figure than just someone walking idle about town, but someone who really tries to challenge the dominant system. Yeah, and then flannery was also for Benjamin an art that needed training and a special sort of habitus. Yeah, so this is just a bit about the background, and I think that Annie Pfeiffer, who is a literary scholar, she wrote a really nice article about flannery from a female perspective, and also has very nice summaries about Benjamin. And she wrote that, yeah, the flaneur is characterized by freedom from financial and familial responsibility, membership in aesthetic or artistic circles, and a position of isolated marginality. So also the man is kind of a marginal figure here. And yeah, the flaneur is precisely the individual who strolls according to his own pace and schedule, a freedom unavailable to the streetwalker or the rest of the working masses. So yeah, while working people did not have the leisure time or the freedom to just walk around in their own schedule, also women did not have this chance mostly, and many other people. But yeah, the flaneur is kind of an in-between figure somewhat privileged, but also marginal at the same time. Yeah, and that's again, quote by Annie Pfeiffer. For Benjamin and Baudelaire, the flaneur is a deviant but suggestive figure because he exists outside of the standardized, regimented schedule of the industrial economy. Walking at his own leisurely pace, the flaneur refuses to conform to the temporality of the commodity clock, which regulated bodies according to its productive routine. Genau. Yeah, I have too many quotes, but yeah, and then here again, in the last quote, she marks that the flaneur's idleness is at once a symptom of his high social standing. So not everyone can afford to be a flaneur and to take himself out of the commodity clock. But at the same time, it's an affront to the capitalist economy. So it's this in-between position. Yeah, and now today, I want to ask, what about flaneurism and the figure of the flaneur today? You can see many, just a few of contemporary walking and flaneur practices. There is Verein der Flaneure in Basel, there's Flaneur Magazine in Berlin. Then there is this very strange flaneur festival in Basel, which has nothing to do with walking actually, but just with buying and consumption, but they call themselves Flaneur Festival. And yeah, so I want to ask, what does critical flaneurism mean today? Yeah, and then also, I mean, I'm rather new in this field of walking. I started really 1 year ago and just collected very broadly whatever I could find. For example, I saw the theater piece Dämonen at Theater Basel, which was quite interesting because like the audience was sitting in the theater and on a huge screen, we could follow a group of young people, professional actors and non-professional actors roaming through the city for 3 hours. So it was kind of a crazy flaneurism in a way. And also there is Soya the Cow, performer from Zurich, who will be part, I think, in September, doing kind of multi-species, more than human queer performances. And then there are many decolonial projects also and post-colonial projects. Of course, just city tours, but also really nice projects like Dissident Paths that took place in Berlin over the last year. So yeah, I mean, and then infrastructure walks, for example, Sam Keller's night walks along the A1 highway through Switzerland. Yeah, just to give you a glimpse of, I mean, you all know that a lot is happening, but for me, it was really overwhelming when I started in this walking field and I realized, okay, there is like walking as a research method, flaneur festivals, sound walks, audio walks, Vermittlungsformate, digital formats. Of course, there we still have all the everyday and political forms of walking. So I'm having a hard time narrowing it down, and yeah, always ask myself, okay, which of these forms can be called flaneuring in a Benjamin sense? Does this make sense or not? Yeah. So some questions that came up for me, and I don't have answers, so it's really just the state of my research now, which is marked by a lot of question marks. Yeah, does it still make sense to speak about speak of flanieren in this critical sense that Benjamin meant? Ja, wie viel Zufall spielt beim Flanieren mit? How about coincidence? Wie lässt sich Flanieren überhaupt untersuchen? So a methodological question. I'm very grateful, for example, that I could interview Marianne and I will have more talks with walking artists to kind of grasp their experience, because with flaneuring, it's always the question, can you see it from the outside, or is it more a subjective, a personal Haltung and Einstellung? Yeah. What changes in the process of going from a solo flaneur to collective flaneur practice as we have it today often? Yeah, and does it make sense to take this flaneur figure from the classical modernity to our late capitalist contemporary, or what what's the different socio-cultural background? Yeah, how does a post and decolonial work on Flannerism look, and which, yeah, I'm also, if any of you has more texts or artworks by non-Western walking art, I'm very interested, because I'm motivated to do a work which is not simply in a Eurocentric context. Yeah, and is Flannerism still ein Affront gegenüber dem kapitalistischen System, oder ist es längst vereinnahmt? Yeah, so for example, the Flaneur Festival in Basel really takes this Flannerism as something just nice to hang out, but then goes with a lot of consumerism. Yeah, for who and when is aimless walking actually a danger and a risk, and for whom is it recovery? Yeah, and more follow-up questions. For example, also I was asked recently if children actually are flaneurs when they walk, when they walk home from school and they do a lot of zigzagging and see a lot of things on the way. Is this a kind of Flannerism? Yeah. Okay, so yeah, these are just my questions that we can discuss later. Oh, do I already speak 15 minutes? Oh. Okay, so yeah, maybe I changed to German a bit now. Yeah, beim Thema Ausschlüsse, I discovered this quote by Henry David Thoreau, a philosopher who wrote something on this essay on walking, which was very popular, and he wrote in the year 1851, im Augenblick befinden sich die besten Partien unserer Gegend noch nicht im Privatbesitz. Die Landschaft gehört niemandem und der Wanderer kann sich erfreulicherweise verhältnismäßig frei bewegen. Doch irgendwann kommt wohl die Zeit, da dies alles aufgeteilt und man sogenannte Landschaftspark- oder Lustgärten anlegen wird, in denen dann nur einige weniger einer eng umgrenzten und exklusiven Lust frönen. Dann, wenn Zäune sich vervielfachen und ergänzt durch Fußangeln und ähnliche einschlägige Erfindungen dafür sorgen, dass die Leute auf den öffentlichen Wegen bleiben. Dann, wenn das Wandern über Gottes Erde gleichbedeutend wird mit unbefugtem Betreten des Grundeigentums irgendeines Herrn. Wer sich einer Sache erfreut unter Ausschluss anderer, bringt sich gemeinhin um die Freude daran. Lasst uns also die Gelegenheit nutzen, bevor die schlimmen Zeiten anbrechen. So I hope it was also in English a bit clear. It's about, eigentlich Enteignung öffentlicher Räume. And yeah, here again, Burkhardt's performance in Kassel. And also Alexander Mitscherlich, the German writer and intellectual, wrote a very important text in the 1960s, which is of course adapted to the German context, which is special after the war, but still. And he said, yeah, he was writing about how the German city reconstruction after war really made one depressive, and that it was very hard to actually enjoy being in them. Ja, and he wrote, wir haben nach dem Krieg die Chance, klüger durchdachte, eigentlich neue Städte zu bauen, vertan. Oder anders ausgedrückt, wenn Städte Selbstdarstellungen von Kollektiven sind, dann ist das, was uns hier als Selbstdarstellung begegnet, alarmierend. Yeah, and also he said that one main problem is this taboo of private property and wanting to make profit with property and ground. Yeah, I think I have to speed up. So there's a huge discussion, of course, about who has a right to city and what happens with like the ongoing neoliberalization of our cities, but also, of course, there is a lot of protest, and I think that critical Flannerism is also a very important protest or practice to undo certain privatizations. And yeah, and then one recent case, of course, also a newer phenomenon is the surveillance. For example, in Berlin, there is a new software system that is supposed to survey the public places. And interestingly, one of the key tasks one of the key tasks of this software is to grasp people who like go over fences or also just walk around in a way which the KI, the AI cannot identify. Ja, so soll die Technik auch ein langes Verharren oder Umhergehen ohne Anlass sowie wiederholtes Erscheinen detektieren. And of course, this is very problematic and it's very unclear how this software will criminalize people. Yeah. So, yeah, I have many more examples of exclusions. And I want to say that, of course, spatial exclusion is always also a social exclusion, and these things go hand in hand. And there are many examples. But I think since I've already talked quite long, I will just skip very much with many things. So this is yeah, so there's a lot. I think this connects also to what Anneke Lubkowitz told yesterday about female mannerism, which is in the last 20 years, there have been quite some important publications on this issue. And also this is maybe an interesting thing because you might know about the Situationists and Guy Debord and psychogeography. And one very interesting figure in this context was Abdel Hafid Khatib, who was the only Algerian person in the French section of the Situationists. And he tried to make cartographs of Les Halles in Paris, and his report could not be finished because of police intervention. And below his text, it says that yeah, the study is incomplete, and this is because our collaborator, so Abdel Hafid Khatib, was subject to police harassment in light of the fact that since September, North Africans have been banned from the streets after 9:30 in the evening. So of course, this was also connected to the Algerian Liberation War, but still it's very interesting to see that the perspectives of non-white people that tried to be part of these interventions really were physically hindered of yeah. And yeah, another quite interesting performance in this sense is William Pope's The Grey White Way, and it was a long time performance, and during 5 years he crawled one of the main streets in New York to reflect upon the standing of Black people in the US. Yeah, and then I would come to the positive part with I think also Labeur, and this symposium is a kind of celebrating possibilities of reappropriation. This is a collective in NRW in Germany, and they call themselves Kurort-Kuratorium, but they are like a mobile kind of, what is Kurort? Healing? No. Yeah, kind of a mobile spa going in these urban places and trying to have leisure time and community sessions there. Yeah, and then maybe some last theory inputs from Michael Labé, who's a French philosopher, and he wrote this book, Platz nehmen gegen eine Architektur der Verachtung. And yeah, he says, for example, that die Privatisierung urbaner Räume, die Zunahme von Strategien der Ausgrenzung und Kontrolle, die rein kommerzielle Ausbeutung immer größerer Gebiete und die Herstellung einer stereotyp standardisierten Stadt durch aggressives City-Branding sind nur einige der Phänomene, in denen eine pathologische Entwicklung sichtbar wird. Yeah, and I mean, he's very pessimist in his vision, and I think we don't all have to share this, but he says that it's really a time where this right to the city, as Lefebvre said in the 68, that it's really in a very dangerous and precarious moment. And yeah, and he says there are a lot of processes going on that are really anti-democratic and draw lines between those and us. And yeah, that it really leads up to a impoverishment of yeah, of the diversity of city spaces. And yeah, so he asks, where is it possible to find rooms and build communities that are for all of the people if city politics or economic politics don't. Ja, und he says, deshalb schlage ich das vor, das Recht auf Stadt als einen Versuch zu denken, die Mittelpunkte unseres Lebens wieder zu bewohnen. Es geht um das städtische Leben, wie es sich Tag für Tag abspielt, nicht um eine permanente Demonstration. And that's also, he says this because there's a lot of political philosophy that is like, oh, Occupy Wall Street is great, or these things. But he says, yeah, it is important to have these demonstration and exceptional moments, but it is even more important on a daily basis to go and use our streets and places in the way we want. Yeah. And yeah, I think with this, maybe I'll end. This is the Long Way Home project that I was allowed to take up from St. Keller, and next Friday we'll have a long way home in Basel if anybody wants to be brought home. So yeah. And okay, yeah, the Long Way Home is a project that St. Keller initiated in 2001 when he had a residency in New York. And he just met at 10 p.m. at Central Station and with this placard. And then people could just come up and they brought each other home the whole night. So you would go to one place and then it's always one person less until only San was left alone to go home alone, but the rest was accompanied in a group. And the idea is that at everybody's place, you can have a sip of water, a cup of tea to regain force for the next sequence. And actually, I thought Basel is so much smaller than New York. It will be done in 3 hours, but we were on the road 8 hours from 10 in the evening till 6 in the morning. And it was quite nice. And yeah, yes. And yeah, I mean, I had more projects here, for example, Why Loiter and Women Walk at Midnight in Delhi. And yeah, maybe this is kind of an outlook because I will go to India next spring or next winter for a research trip, 6 weeks to Delhi, Mumbai and Bangalore, because there are quite a few feminist collectives that really do walking interventions because, yeah, especially in India and big cities in India, women are still very much excluded from their right to stroll around. And yeah, I'm very excited. Yeah, so this is just a small glimpse into my work. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this rich insight in your ongoing research of your PhD. Are there any questions? Yes.
Erstmal danke. Nee, es wird nur ins Netz übertragen. Ich höre mich jetzt nicht genau. Also sorry, mich schon gewundert. Danke, das war extrem reichhaltig. Also was ich mal fragen wollte, ist, sorry, what I wanted to ask you is really like, concepts like the Vermeire, they grow in a certain time in a specific context, and they develop, but also you bring in questions like post-colonial critique, other layers and so on. But how I ask myself sometimes how we can be truly interpreted these different layers, because there is this context and we can't maybe just separate it from the context, and we have to interpret it as a historical thing. And all this layering, growing of contexts, of like maybe it's even something else now, the concept of the Vermeire as it was mentioned, like conceived at the beginning. And I ask myself how you can make this growing of this concept of the flaneur graspable in your thesis and still be true to the origin in a sense. Yeah.
Yes, very good question. I think that's also maybe one of the reasons. I mean, I have many reasons to den Schreibprozess rausschieben, but I think, yeah, I have a bit, I have many questions in how far should I, or which place should Benjamin and this discourse have, because it's clear that the focus of my work is on contemporary practices. And still, I mean, it's interesting that a lot of critical walking formats call themselves Flanerie-Projekt oder Verein der Flaneure. So kind of the name or the word is still there, but I also think it's, and I mean, there is still a resisting moment in it, as maybe Benjamin said, and at the same time, of course, the city and the societies have changed so much in these 100 years that it feels also a bit anachronistic to take it. And yeah, I hope that I will maybe just have one introduction chapter where I talk about Benjamin, but then also make clear that I'm talking about another epoch now where this term is used in different spaces. But if you have any recommendations how I could keep the layers.
Yeah, but just add the word surfing, and then you also on completely different layers that are somewhat connected. But I could think.
Yeah, thank you. No, but it's important also. I mean, also when going to India, like I had a interview now with one of the initiators from Mumbai, and I asked her, "Do you know the term flaneuring?" And she was, "No, never heard. What's that?" And yeah, so it's also in intercultural context, or as soon as you go away from Western countries, of course, this concept is a bit questionable then, yeah. Or at least it's not their background. Yeah.
I have another question. You mentioned, and it has to do with what you said, that the term flaneur is placed within a very particular sort of historical time, which is also linked to capitalism and production. And then I was thinking if part of the definition of flaneur maybe has to do with purpose, which is anyways a very, very broad definition, but somehow connected to productivity and therefore product and Ware, which is the thing, the one quote that you mentioned, which is kind of an interesting one. And I wonder, what are your thoughts on this? And also because I recently was asked about the role of unproductive spaces in the city, and I thought that was interesting because it really depends on what kind of view you have on this, also, or through which lens, basically. The unproductive spaces for humans may be the most productive for other non-human beings, usually the case. In any sense, I wanted you to maybe elaborate on this purpose and productivity of walking in regards to the productivity of spaces in the city.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, as I have said, I'm still not very, I don't completely understand this Benjamin quote. And yeah, I think it's very much embedded in his Marxist thinking also. But yeah, I mean, I think flaneuring is on the one hand maybe intentional, intentless walking, which is kind of already a bit paradox. Or you have the aim to get lost, which is also kind of paradoxical. And yeah, I think this moment of like not using your time in a way that is seen productive from the dominant perspective, this would be still something that I think is also today in the word loitering, we already have this. It's kind of a bit not really doing something to come to a product. So I think this is maybe a continuous aspect of critical flannery. But yeah, I think Benjamin really wrote this in a time when all these mass industry just came up. So it was much more, yeah, I think now in too late capitalism, as it's sometimes sociologists say, we live in too late capitalism because there has already been so much damage. And also with climate crisis, I think we're in a new setting where these questions of productivity or non-productivity are set in very different forms again. But I think there's something about this unproductive spaces that is still an ongoing challenge of dominant logics, no, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, once again, thank you so much. We have another presentation, and then we go into music, performance, and also party outside. So now, kann ich das machen?
Warte noch 2 Sekunden.
Okay. So I wait a bit, so Geert, it's your turn now. So it's another 30 minutes and then we'll clear the space and then we can move around then.
Actually, I could start already in the sense that thank you, Julia.
I do it.
Okay, good.
But
I just need 2 minutes.
he needs to
Yes,
set up things and then we also.
you can introduce me if you want.
Huh?
You can introduce me.
You want to do?
I can start whatever you want.
No, no. I just reveal you. But he needs to go.
Yes, you can do whatever
You will do it.
I don't need a slide to start.
Okay, that's perfect. If you want to have meet them, Okay, now it's my pleasure to introduce Geert, or how you say?
Yeah.
Geert. So it's a bit tricky for me. Geert is a poet, artist, creator, and researcher working on the intersection of walking arts, locative media, and ecological thought. Sorry. His interdisciplinary practice focuses on spatial writing, geopoetics, sound performance, and socially engaged art. As artistic coordinators of WALK, or it's called WALK, Walking Art and Local Communities, he develops international collaboration, connecting artistic practice, digital commons, and modern human perspectives through walking as a relational and cultural methodology. And also on this network we met, and you invited Violette and myself to present our walking symposium 2 weeks ago or so. Then we thought it's payback time and it would be nice to have you here, even in person, because it's very much about connecting and networking and cooperations in your work, and that's why you're here, and we're looking forward to hear more about what's your practice. Yes, so we put that in here.
Yes. So thank you, Violetta and Johannes, for this warm invitation and for this warm, small, temporary community of walkers. Julia, I just come back from Catalonia. I was in the Portbou. And it is incredible how Walter Benjamin is still alive there. The people cherish his, unfortunately, very short presence in Portbou. And this, by the way, talking about payback, there is quite a generous. Can you hear me? Yes, yeah. There's quite a generous grant, which is called the Walter Benjamin grant for walking art, organized by Nauco Clea, an organization I very closely work together with, that invites walking artists to be inspired by this unfortunate last walk of Walter Benjamin coming from France to Portbou. And it's an amazing mind. And the grant is what is exceptional in this world, quite a nice payment, actually. It was one of the questions I got when I was asked to talk about, for an audience of high school students. The first question I got is, how much does this pay to be a walking artist? And tricky question. Actually, it happened as well in Cyprus. I hope nobody from Cyprus is here, but I was invited in a radio school to talk about sound walking. That when I started to explain that walking is actually an art form, I felt a very hostile atmosphere in the classroom, extremely hostile, because the young people were actually, as I interpreted, feeling that I was making a joke of them by putting forward such a surreal claim that walking could be art. And after some time, actually, I felt that it shifted. They got a bit friendlier, but not because they took serious what I did, because I felt that they actually thought I was completely crazy. And so that was 10 years ago, and now we are here. And I think I already said yesterday in the conversation I had, so much has changed in this world of walking art. We, in the last 20 years, we had amazing people like Francisco Carreri who talked about walking as transformation, Rebecca Solnit, who brought walking into a cultural context. We had people like Karen O'Rourke, who brought walking into a more, let's say, digital age, talking about mapping and technical digital applications. And walking keeps developing. And my point is, I'll open this now, that in the diversity that walking arts became, one second, I'll open this. Sorry about that. In my enthusiasm, I forgot I have actually have written down some things. Anyway, there's the walking art today has developed in something extremely diverse and rich, incorporating the different fields, artists, researchers, ecologists, architects, geographers, technologists, and local communities, even when it comes from a much more limited approach from psychography, conceptual art, land art, and philosophical approaches. That's why I thought this was so interesting, Julia, that you made actually this bridge of something of more than 100 years ago now, of 100 years ago, and still bringing it in a contemporary frame. But still, we live in a very different time. And actually, my question is if walking is actually the most important still in walking arts. I think, in my view, it is about relations and how walking relates us with the world around us. It's the whole series of walking artists that have put the foundations. They were, let me see. Okay. Okay. Talking about technology. Okay. Okay. There we go. Almost. Now, you're talking about the foundations of walking art. It comes mainly from individual walkers, solitary walkers, starting with Rousseau, Wordsworth, and as well what Anneke told us, Dorothy's plays as much of a role in that. Thoreau, Baudelaire, Benjamin, De Boer, Richard Long, Fulton, and many artists who had a very important but a role that remained of a solitary, mostly male walker, explorer, hero, appropriating the territory. And their role is undeniable. They shaped walking as a form of reflection, critique, artistic practice, and embodied inquiry. But still, the last 20 years, a lot of things happened. Now it is not anymore about a solitary walker. Instead, it is about the collective movement where participation, ecological awareness, situationist knowledge, and long-term relationships are the center. Now, my idea to go to walking as a commons is not seeing commons as only as a shared resource, but as a shared resource that is together with the people and practices that care for it. So in that sense, I understand walking as commoning. It's creating and sustaining relationships between people places, stories, memories, ecologies, and forms of knowledge. So the walk, as I said, becomes less important than what actually comes of emerge through it. A walk is not longer an event. It is a process that through which relationships are built and maintained. Spaziergang-Wissenschaft was always one of my big influences. What Lucius and Annemarie together developed. So what fascinated me about Burkert is exactly that also for him it was not really an interest in walking itself. He was interested in the perception. And very undeceivably simple. Landscapes are not simply out there, but they are not simply waiting to be observed, but they are produced by cultural assumptions, social structures, memories, expectations, and habits of perception. So walking therefore becomes a way of investigating how reality is constructed. And that surprisingly remains relevant today also after 30 years. So walking as knowledge. No, when we walk, knowledge is not coming as something ready. It is generated through movement, to encounter, to uncertainty, surprise, attention, and experience. So the walker is not a spectator, but actually an investigator. He looks for and finds relationships. And it is exactly that, walking as knowledge and walking as perception, that links with contemporary walking arts today. They are not about, simply at least not about moving to landscapes, they are about learning to landscapes. They create opportunities to find situated knowledge, collective inquiry, and ecological understanding. So walking, and so we come to the topic of this symposium, becomes a way of thinking. There is a lineage, a second lineage, as I call it, after the lineage of the 20th century walking artists and thinkers, inclusive Carreri, Rourke, and Solnit, that bring in a digital layer. And artists and thinkers about locative, telematic, or network art, like Roy Ascott or Paul Ryan or Kit Galloway, Shadi Rabinovich, they have a concern about production of objects in art, and they focus more on the creation of relationships. They explored in their work how meaningful connections could emerge across distance, not only in the place, but through communication networks and distributed participation. And when I look at many of the contemporary art, walking art projects, then I see actually happening the same thing. The walking art, walking projects are increasingly transnational. They are about collaborations, collective archives, online platforms, distributed communities, and planetary conversations. So the network art extends the logic of the path to the digital space. If you understand the path itself as the humanity's oldest network, then now this path becomes a network. Locative Media Supercluster is a collective together with Fred Adam that I founded. And that started from technology, but we are not so interested in our technology itself. We are interested in how technology can help us connect. We work mainly with maps as spaces of dialogue, stories that become a link to places, and landscapes as interfaces of participation and exchange. So we are not interested in build technological systems, but to create relationships through these systems. The collaborative mapping, as we are developing telematic experiments and interactive networks as Earth Revolution, are all about connection of people, places, stories, and forms of ecological knowledge. The main project we are working on now is called Earth Art Revolution. And it actually starts from a question beyond how people and places connect, but from the question, how can an artistic practice help us reconnect with the living Earth itself? It emerges from the growing realization that many of the crises we face today, climate change, biodiversity loss, displacement, social fragmentation, are actually crises of relationship. That there is a profound disconnection between human societies and the ecological systems that sustain them. In that sense, we make a practice of belonging more than seeing art as representation or critique. And at the heart of this project are Earth stories. We don't see landscape as passive backgrounds for human activity. Earth stories seek to reveal the relationships that connect people, places, species, memories, histories, and ecological processes. And walking remains one of the most direct ways to entering in a relationship with the landscape. The Earth Art Revolution is a distributed archive of how people connect with places and other species, but realized by walking as one of the various practices in which what we call ecological intelligence can be cultivated. Ecological intelligence is not about awareness of the nature around us, but about the relations we have with nature and the direct relations we have. And by using listening, storytelling, mapping, artistic creation, collaborative research, and community participation as ingredients, we come to what we call the Earth Revolution as this archive of Earth stories, where participants contribute experiences, observations, memories, and creative work and knowledges about their environments. This ends up to being not a single narrative, but a polyphonic commons of ecological imagination. For me, this points toward an a very important possibility for walking arts. The significance of walking may ultimately lie not in movement itself, but in its ability to cultivate ecological intelligence, the capacity to perceive relationships, recognize interdependence, and imagine new forms of coexistence between humans, technologies, and a more than human world. Walking becomes a way of entering the Earth story, and art becomes a way of helping that story unfold collectively. The project of one of the projects that for me illustrates best the shift from this individual walking to relational practice is Visible March of Prespa. Visible March of Prespa began in 2007, initiated by Yanis Yogas. It was then an initiative of the new art school in Florina in the north of Greece, after there was an obligation to decentralize art schools. And a second art school in Greece was founded in the middle of nature. And one of the focuses of this school was actually to have a horizontal the way of education and to relate with the landscape around them, which is a mountain landscape. And since then, since 2007, as an art school outside, this kept developing till in 2019, Yanis Yogas invited me to start the Walking Arts Encounters in Prespa, building on this very deep engagement with place that already was built on research, ecology, the exploration of this borderland at the border of Albania and North Macedonia, and having international researchers contributing. It is more than a research, it's more than education. It's about walking together in these abandoned villages at the border, the narrow paths, the lakes and the mountains. It's also what eventually brought so many people to Prespa, and they keep coming back, not only for the place, but for the relationships that develops around these experiences. The whole idea of the Visual March was not only to observe, not only to walk in the landscape, but to engage with it, to listen to it, to return to it again and again over more than 15 years. And that is made it for me a temporary community that is for a prototype of what contemporary walking arts ecology may look like. As one side deeply rooted in a place and yet capable of generating an international network of artistic, intellectual, and social exchange. Now, if Visual March was rooted in a place and gave importance to a place made of walking, another initiative that I co-founded, gave importance to community. It started in 2016, and some of you were there already at that time. It was conceived as a gathering around walking arts practice. But it was very different from a traditional, conventional symposium or festival. It was not about coming there, presenting your work, and leave. It was about walking together, listening to each other, sharing meals, conversations, spending time in landscape that were intentionally chosen because they were remote, challenging, and unfamiliar. And every edition, there was always at the beginning or at the end, just a walk with no other intention or objective than being in an unknown place together, often in silence. And something very important happened during these shared experiences. Walking became a common ground to which people of very different disciplines and backgrounds were meeting. Artists, researchers, ecologists, performers, writers, and as well local participants found themselves engaged in conversations that may never have happened within a more traditional structure. In that sense, Made of Walking became something more than an encounter or a gathering. It became a community. It led to many collaborations, friendships, projects, and even institutions, ironically, that emerged from these encounters and that began simply by walking together. What appeared initially as a temporary event gradually developed into a network of relationships that continued far beyond any particular edition. The project expanded in Delphi 2016, La Remieux, Cyprus, Prespa, Guimarães, and Catalonia. It also expanded conceptually because every edition was introducing a different ecological, social, or cultural question, and every encounter gave a new perspective. Soundwalk September was originated in one of these gatherings, Made of Walking in La Remieux, and was the global participation event that emerged out of these physical encounters. Traditionally, walking practices are very tied to specific places and have their strength in being situated and local. But Soundwalk September as a collective and global event showed that local experiences could become also a part of a larger planetary conversation. People were walking in this first edition in 2017 in different cities, villages, and landscapes. And through listening and sharing, these experiences became connected. This was not a centralized project or a homogeneous community. Instead, it became a distributed network of listening practices, each rooted in a specific place, while simultaneously participating in something much larger. And this, for me, represents one of the earliest examples of walking arts operating at a generally planetary scale, while remaining grounded in local experience. If Made of Walking helped to create an international community, Walkless in Create explored how that community might continue to exist between the physical encounters and the beyond the encounters. It began quite modestly with Soundwalk September, in a distributed practice of people walking, listening, and making sound walks all over the world. And it evolved in an international platform, now connecting over 8,000 artists, researchers, walkers, sound practitioners, writers, and communities across continents. And as you may see as well on this page, there are also 2 awards which you can participate, the Marsarto Award 26 and the Soundwalk September Award. By uploading your work, you can win a cash prize. What is essential about Walkless in Create that we never saw it as a digital infrastructure. We saw it as a space where local experiences can enter into dialogue with the global community without, again, losing their specificity. Stories from one landscape can resonate with experiences from another. Knowledge circulates without becoming standardized. Diversity is not erased, but strengthened through connection. It's, in this sense, Walkless in Create is not a website, but a commons. It functions simultaneously as an archive, publication platform, learning environment, podcast network, and meeting place. And more important, it provides a framework through which relationships can continue to develop between physical encounters. Now, we went further. We saw this digital platform as a starting point for what we call a digital commons, where through telematics and planetary participation, we could include a global conversation about about walking arts, and actually exploring how as cultural life becomes increasingly hybrid, part physical, part digital, what kind of infrastructures we need as artists. And for me, Walkless in Create suggests one possible answer: infrastructures that are distributed rather than centralized, participatory rather than hierarchical, and rooted in values of commons rather than ownership. In this sense, it's not simply a platform about walking, it's an experiment how communities of practice might inhabit both physical and digital worlds simultaneously. The last iteration is the walking assembly. If Walkless in Create explores what distributed digital commons might look like, the walking assembly explores something equally important: what happens when we rethink how we gather physically. This assembly, which is an encounter, was organized a few weeks ago in Catalonia, was built on earlier nomadic conferences as the Walking Arts and Relational Geographies in Catalonia, about where some of you were as well. And rather than organizing knowledge around conference rooms, presentations, and formal sessions, it asked a very different question: how can we learn through movement? What happens if learning itself becomes a journey? The knowledge is not organized around the stage. It emerges literally through movement. The Walking Arts and Relational Geographies conferences were already integrating walks between the places of knowledge sharing as an essential part of the experience, not happening in one place, but in various places at walking distances in different cities or towns from each other, integrating these walks as feeding the discourse and the topic. But in the walking assembly, we went a step further. That was really being in nature itself, seeing the Muga River, where we were gathering around as a teacher, 3 days walking together, being in nature, observing ecological processes, discussing ideas, but at the same time, shared cooking, playing and swimming, and just spending time together, seeing the landscape to which we travel as the real place of, as the real source of the knowledge we are looking for, bringing together people from various disciplines. Now coming to what all this brings together, walking arts and local communities. Walking arts and local communities is an European project. It brings together 5 main partners from 5 different countries in Europe, in Portugal, Spain, France, and Belgium, and nodes, associated partners from Sweden, the Netherlands, Germany, Italy, UK, and Australia. So spanning more than 10 countries. And reaching out as well for a dialogue worldwide about walking arts, searching how walking as an artistic practice, as a social infrastructure, an ecological inquiry, and a commons-making project can be further developed. I'll go to the final conclusion. Ecological intelligence is the red thread to all the projects I present here. And it is a concept that became more and more important to me over the years. That is developed by me and Fred in the locative media supercluster. As said, it is not seen as a mere awareness of what is around us. When Gregory Bateson spoke about the patterns which connects, he was pointing toward that ecological intelligence is awareness of interdependence, is perceiving relations. And walking cultivates this capacity in a very direct way. And this future making is the reason why walking arts actually matter today. The significance lies not in aesthetics or cultural production. It is in creating conditions for ecological perception. It's seeing walking arts as more than an artistic field, but as a framework for future making that recognizes that places are connected to histories, histories to communities, communities to ecologies, and ecologies to larger planetary systems. In a time where we are experiencing increasing fragmentations, socially, politically, ecologically, and even technologically, walking offers a very simple but powerful counter practice. It slows us down, helps us pay attention, and reminds us that understanding begins with relationships, relationships to place, to one another, and to the living world around us. And that's where, for me, the promise of contemporary walking arts lies. Not in movement, not simply in movement, but in connection. Not simply in journeys, but in the commons that emerge along the way. From place to planet, walking becomes a way of knowing, relating, and imagining shared futures together. And here you find some of the references to the initiatives and collectives I was talking about. We are also organizing an online course, also how ironical this may sound, about walking arts. And we are now in a module called Walking in the Digital Age. If you go to supercluster.eu, you can find more information about it. And if you want to have more of this in a very collaborative atmosphere with practices and sharing of ideas between the participants, then you're welcome to join this free series of sessions. That was my 2 cents in 30 minutes, and looking forward to your feedback.
Thank you, Geert. Geert. Yeah, a lot of networks we saw, so maybe we have to process it and check all the websites. So we have time for 2 questions, and then we put all the chairs away and make space for the performance couple. Is there a question or a comment? Fred is also around the whole day and tomorrow as well, so if something comes later. So then, yeah.
What I say, I don't think it's so obvious. I mean, not obvious in the sense that it's complex, but it does actually question walking arts as a walking practice. What I talk about is walking beyond walking. And for many of you that are practicing walking arts, like Hamish Fulton says, walking is the work. How I see it, we are going beyond walking. Walking is something that brings us to relating with each other. And my question was, how do you feel about that? Is this, well, I see them as perfectly complementary. But I can understand for some, it may be more difficult to see these 2 worlds, the worlds of relating. Although walking arts is actually the only art form where artists really work together. You come here really to participate in each other's work. You don't see this in much other art forms. So in that sense, it is this collectiveness, this co-creation where Violetta and Johannes were talking about yesterday for their summer course, is so much part of walking arts that it is about relation. On the other side, of course, you are artists that use the body and the moving body on a very physical way that is going beyond this relational as a method. So it's an open question. This walking arts may be more about questions than about answers. So in that sense, yes.
And it's not really a question. It's just, as we have seen, you're so incredibly engaged. So I think really the walking art owns a lot to you, because it's incredible, all this network all over Europe and all internationally that have been built in the last 10 years. It's really incredible. And I think it's an applause for that.
I think so.
Because you ask a question also, I will try to answer your question. Actually, I cannot answer your question, but what I realized coming from an art form, which is also looking for participatory events, and I go to many participatory events in different art forms, but actually what I realized the difference is that in walking, there's not much knowledge hierarchy between the one that is guiding and the one that are joining. Or like we all are very experienced in walking, that maybe with dance, then you really feel the difference between the one that are like dance professionals and the one that are joining, and also a certain shyness to one's own movement, because you can see the difference of how you have trained or not trained, even though I find everybody knows how to dance. But it's much more difficult to make people participate.
Okay, we leave it here.
Just one.
Yeah. Last one.
Yes, to be very clear, nothing of this I did alone. By principle, it was always in collaboration with other people. And that is what made it also so rich. It's never been the vision or work of one person. And I hope this makes it sustainable. And as well, that's partly answers your question as well. The public is the artist. There is no division between artist and public, which makes this field also so unique and I think also sustainable. Somebody asked me yesterday, I will not say who, but he and asked me what would happen if walking arts overnight would disappear. Would it be missed by the cultural field? And or would it be absorbed by all these different performance, theater, architecture, and so on? And it would be missed, yes, because it does actually relate to this very body and movement and the redefining a practice through the senses and to a movement that cannot be replaced by any other. The body is the pencil, the body is the brush, and the walking arts is here to stay. That's yeah.
Sounds like a final quote for the end of tomorrow, but we still have to continue. Thank you so much. Thank you. Sharon, do you want that we put the chairs on the side? So please help with that. And then